Then you burst into fire. Forever.
Hello.
Hello.
You're listening to The Full Blossom of the Evening, a podcast about David Lynch and Twin Peaks.
I'm Indigo.
And I'm Hilary.
Listeners, we're going to tell it to you, and we're going to tell it to you straight. Today, we're talking about
Rita Hayworth.
It was Laura. And I saw her glowing. I saw her smiling. I feel like I'm gonna dream tonight.
All right, listeners. Well, when we decided to do this topic about 2 months ago, I foolishly said to Indigo, this will be a really straightforward one because it's really just two films. It's Gilda, starring Rita Hayworth, and Mulholland Drive. So this will kind of be a nice little bite-sized episode for us. And what did you say, Indigo?
famous last words. Like, we do this every time. We'll pick a topic, and maybe not every time, but there have been multiple times where Hilary has been like, oh yeah, I think that'll be like an easy, straightforward one. And then we start getting into the research, and because everything is connected, then we go, oh, wait, no, this is gonna be another big one. So that happened again.
And in such a big way.
Yeah.
This allusion to Gilda in Mulholland Drive just uncovered layers of meaning in the film that we could not have imagined before we started. And it has been such a delight. And I know we're both just so excited to talk about this today.
Yeah, and I mean, even to the point that this episode, I think originally we would have thought to just call Gilda, but now it's Rita Hayworth. I mean, once we started looking into her life and, you know, her whole body of work and everything, that was when we really saw the connections. We were like, I mean, there are connections between Gilda and Mulholland Drive, but it's so much bigger than that.
Yes.
Her personal life connects so much into the sort of Lynch universe as we know it, and to other works of his, including Twin Peaks.
And there are going to be so many what we were going to consider direct references to Rita Hayworth's larger life in Mulholland Drive.
Yeah.
So many little moments that connect directly to her. So.
Even actors.
Yes. Well, we both began preparing for this episode with a biography of Rita Hayworth by Barbara Leeming called If This Was Happiness. This wasn't a strategy or plan. It was really just kind of dumb luck on my point because I needed a new audiobook for long drives. So I was like, oh, I'll just listen to this thing about Rita Hayworth. So it was kind of an impulsive download. And then it was so fortunate.
Yeah.
You also then got the audiobook,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, because you were like, hey, I started reading this and it's kind of blown my mind. And I was like, oh, okay, easy. Yeah, I'll pick it up. And I also got the audiobook. It was just available on Hoopla. And so I went ahead and got it with my library card. And I mean, I told Hilary about this. I am not a huge nonfiction for pleasure reader. Like, I'll read it and find it interesting and stuff, but it takes a lot for nonfiction to grip me like this. Like, whenever I was not reading this book, I was thinking about it, and I was recommending it to friends and coworkers and telling people, like, this is just a fascinating book. Even if you know nothing about Rita Hayworth, which I really didn't going in.
I knew nothing.
And like, I just knew her name. I knew she existed. And I left after reading this book feeling like I need to go back in time and save Rita Hayworth. I need to figure out how to time travel so that I can go back and beat up her ex-husbands and her dad and also save her.
She's the real life Laura Palmer,
Yeah.
who we want to get a time machine and save.
Yeah, like all those memes and stuff where it's like girls only want one thing and it's to go back in time and save Laura Palmer. No. Okay, we might not be able to save Laura because she's a character, but we can save Rita. And we have a lot to say about this.
You know, I think that this was such an important way to be introduced to her through this book. And I agree with you. I also would never pick up a book like this for pleasure.
Yeah.
I don't typically like star biographies, period.
Yeah.
But reading about her first and then watching Gilda.
Yeah.
You know, we had so much context then, and I was so excited. By the time I watched Gilda, I was like, oh, I get to meet her.
Right. Yeah, it's like when you have a friend that tells you about like this person they know in their life or something, and they're like, oh, I can't wait for you to come to this party and meet Rita.
Yeah.
And they're telling you, and then finally, you know, it works out that you get to be in the same room as them, and you're just blown away. Like, you know, they're telling you like, oh, I just know you guys are gonna hit it off and you'll be great friends. And that's how it felt.
Yeah, it was delightful to finally see her on screen.
Yeah.
And it is also kind of how audiences in 1944 would have received Gilda, because Rita Hayworth was already really well known at that point.
Right. And it was a lot of like publicity in a way that was kind of new back then, which we'll get more into later.
Definitely.
But yeah, it was the impact that she had on audiences and society back then was crazy. Her star power was crazy. She was known internationally. Men everywhere were obsessed with her. Women were obsessed with her. And now we know why.
And we're obsessed with her,
and
too.
now we are, too.
And so I want to talk about the films that we watched and make some recommendations. So listeners,
Yes.
if you have no familiarity with Rita Hayworth films, you should probably pause and then definitely watch Gilda. And I would also suggest watch The Lady from Shanghai second. So if you only have time to watch two, those would be the ones. Would you say that's fair?
I
for
would
our
say so,
episode?
because I think, especially in terms of what's going to connect with this episode, I think those are the two that play a huge role in sort of showing her, if that makes sense, listeners. Because of course Gilda's the one that we're mainly going to talk about and its connection to Mulholland Drive, but The Lady from Shanghai plays into her personal life a lot because she's in it with Orson Welles, who she was married to for a time.
And I think there are connections with Mulholland Drive there too.
Yeah.
And Lady from Shanghai.
And also with her life. Like
Yeah.
we talked about, and also Leeming talks about in her book how there are a lot of parallels between that film and her own life.
And speaking of that, the film You Were Never Lovelier would be
Yeah.
my third, but very close third recommendation, because first of all, it's wonderful.
Yes.
And second, it's her in a musical. It's like a
Yeah.
different kind of character that she played. She's with Fred Astaire.
And you get to see her dance.
Oh, her dancing.
And her dancing was one of the things she was known for.
Ugh.
And so to you have to watch something where you really get to see her shine like that, because it is beautiful. Her movements are so fluid. She's so graceful.
She was Fred Astaire's favorite dancing partner.
Yeah.
He was blown away by her skill, how quickly she learned the most complicated steps, her work ethic. You know, I love the story that he told about like teaching her a really complicated routine, and they broke for lunch.
Yeah. Yes. The quote is, he said, "She learned steps faster than anyone I'd ever known. I'd show her a routine before lunch. She'd be back right after lunch and have it down to perfection. She apparently figured it out in her mind while she was eating."
So you listeners, you deserve to give yourself this treat of,
Yes.
of seeing her. And there are two musicals that she's in with Fred Astaire. You Were Never Lovelier. has really interesting connections to her personal life.
Right.
Also, so I recommend it. And then I would recommend Blood and Sand, and we'll talk about that later when we're talking about Mulholland Drive specifically.
Yeah, that one is an important watch because that's a big example of her doing the sort of femme fatale. And you get to see her as this sort of hard and sexual, fierce woman.
Absolutely heartless.
Yes,
Yeah,
heartless.
yeah. Well, the other films I watched of hers were Only Angels Have Wings, You'll Never Get Rich, CoverGirl, and Affair in Trinidad. You should probably see all those too. However, to say that I got kind of obsessed with Rita Hayworth, maybe an understatement.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, aside from Barbara Leaming's book, the other author that we leaned heavily on in preparation for this episode is Adrienne McLean, especially her book, Being Rita Hayworth, Labor, Identity, and Hollywood Stardom. These two books complement each other really well, so Leaming focuses on the many tragic elements of Hayworth's life, while McLean focuses on Hayworth's agency as a performer and businesswoman. Both things are true about her.
Yeah.
She was a victim of horrific circumstances and truly monstrous people. And she was also a consummate professional who never stopped fighting.
Yeah.
For her personal autonomy, for love, for everything. So she faced really horrifying obstacles and challenges. She's a real-life Laura Palmer figure.
Yeah, I mean, that was like one of the big things that I remember we brought up when we first sort of sat down to talk about where we wanted to take this episode, that like we see so much of Laura in her, and we'll get into the details about why, but it's also just her spirit, that strong, fierce spirit of hope and constantly trying to hold on and fight for a better life for herself and trying to not let the darkness win. We just, again, we can't say it enough how much we fell in love with Rita Hayworth doing this research.
And this is why David Lynch must have as well.
Yeah. And we know, like, you know, we always like to talk about, okay, what are the facts and what are we speculating? And we know that David was a big lover of old Hollywood, like classic Hollywood stars and everything, you know, loved Marilyn Monroe, loved Marlon Brando. And so it is not, you know, it's no surprise that he would be drawn to Rita Hayworth as well, because she is also a woman in trouble.
And still a fighter every step of the way.
Yeah, and still fought and put out incredible work. And yeah. So we're going to start with some biographical details about Rita Hayworth and give you kind of some background into the things that we've been mentioning. And many of these will have obvious connections to Mulholland Drive. Listeners, you'll probably start noticing these connections even before we discuss them in this episode.
Yeah, so you can get out your corkboard with your red string.
your Charlie board,
You start making those connections, and then when we get to that point, you know, you can say, I already saw that.
Yes.
And maybe you'll notice some things that even we miss.
Right. Yeah, and probably the most prominent theme of any story about Rita Hayworth is that she was more than one person, a divided self, and in so many ways. So many people in her life say this about her in interviews and stuff. Like it's brought up constantly in Leaming's book from different sources, from partners, from coworkers, from friends,
Even from her herself.
Yeah, even from her herself. So actors by profession have to be able to inhabit multiple identities in a way, but Hayworth was extreme even by that measure.
The divide, obvious even to those who didn't know her well, was between her performance and her actual personality. She is an absolute powerhouse on screen. She's vivacious, charismatic, just unabashed. In real life, though, Rita Hayworth was extremely shy and quiet. James Cagney worked with her on Strawberry Blonde and said that after doing a scene, she would go back to her chair and sit there and not communicate once the camera stopped. Just completely changed.
Yeah, Vincent Sherman, on watching her perform Trinidad Lady for the first time, said, "It was like you plugged her in. She hadn't been alive before. Now she was electric."
Hermes Pan, who was one of her lifelong friends, said a whole different personality came out for the camera. She always reminded me of a little girl. She would giggle, or she would do little things that little girls do. People would think of her as the glamorous love goddess, and yet she was just a little 8-year-old girl. It was an amazing combination. You couldn't believe the two were the same person.
And Orson Welles, her ex-husband, said the whole wicked Gilda figure was absolutely false. It was a total impersonation, nothing to do with her, because she didn't have that kind of sex appeal at all. She carried it off, but her essential quality was sweetness. There was a richness of texture about her that was very interesting and very unlike a movie star.
That might be my favorite quotation of this little set, because him saying her essential quality was sweetness.
Yeah.
I think that comes through in every story about her. And that's something that everybody said about her as well.
Right. She was just a really deeply loving person. And it's just, I mean, again, like it's countless stories of that the way that she was off screen was just very quiet, shy, polite, very sweet, but this kind of femme fatale you would see on screen, or even ones where she wasn't playing the femme fatale and she was just exuding that like charisma. She really does. When she is on screen, when the camera's on, it is insane. Like the way that she just totally rules that screen.
Yeah.
But it's like whenever she was just herself, when she was Rita, she was just, she kept to herself. She was quiet, shy. She wanted a quiet life.
Well, this divide in her personality was part of her appeal, even in the 1940s. She was described by film magazines as a shy siren, fiery on the screen, but a sweet and quiet girl next door as soon as the cameras stopped. Adrienne McLean states, "The difference of Rita Hayworth, the star, as a person from her film roles is the characteristic that functionally differentiates Hayworth as a commodity from other stars." Because, you know, it, like we said at the beginning of this little segment, the idea that actors inhabit different roles other than their own identities. Sure.
Yeah.
But Rita Hayworth was different, even in that capacity.
And this is something that I think, you know, we can see the roots of this. We can see where the transformation goes all the way back. She had, you know, performed from a young age. So she also just the transformation into Rita Hayworth from her original self is a whole big part of this.
Well, that's another fascinating aspect of her multiplicity, is that this Rita Hayworth person was a deliberately publicly manufactured other.
Yeah, and listeners, if you check the Instagram, I'm definitely going to post some kind of side-by-side comparisons, because really she looked so different.
She was born Margarita Carmen Cancino, and she becomes Rita Hayworth. It was a deliberate, painstaking transformation at the hands of her first husband, Edward Judson.
Who we hate. Who we hate, just for the record. He was way too old for her and controlling and abusive.
Yeah. They married when she was only 19.
Which he had been grooming her beforehand.
And he put her on a diet, a strict exercise regimen, experimented with her hair color and her style.
And then my least favorite thing is that he made her undergo 16 months of electrolysis to raise her hairline an inch because he thought she would look better that way.
Yeah. Painful electrolysis.
Which is, yeah, it's really painful. One of my best friends is trans and gets it done as like a gender affirming thing and has told me that it is extremely painful. No one would choose to do this for funsies.
Right. And that
it's not like a haircut.
And in the case of your friend, she's doing that voluntarily.
Right. Like she's doing this because it makes her feel like herself.
Rita Hayworth was doing this because her controlling older husband was forcing her to. Because he married her as an investment.
Which he reminded her.
Yes, he wanted her to become a movie star and he did everything he could to get her there. including altering her physical appearance, cutting her naturally dark brown hair shorter, dyeing it eventually this shade of auburn that
Which she became very known for.
Yeah. But then he also instigated a really intense publicity campaign. Yeah. He had her out at clubs being photographed as much as possible. Like, she was very available to the press for interviews at all times.
Which then ended up hurting her when she tried to leave him because he had the press wrapped around his finger, and he started painting her as this difficult woman and wanted the press to think like, oh, she's not doing these interviews because she's difficult. No, it's because she was shy and she never wanted to do that in the first place.
Yeah.
So talk about two different selves. It's like the Rita that people were seeing in these magazines was carefully controlled and created by her abusive husband.
It got so bad that he even suggested she should sleep with any Hollywood executives who wanted her. They were married.
Yeah, he was just happy to pimp her out if it meant more money in his pocket.
Right.
No matter that she was uncomfortable with that.
And she refused.
Yeah.
Well, this transformation that she underwent was well documented, publicized, and it was part of her appeal. Part of what made her the star that she was the fact that she was manufactured. People really loved this.
Yeah. In Barbara Leaming's words, the public seemed utterly enthralled by the idea that a star could be created through publicity, by contrast with the otherworldly likes of Greta Garbo or Marlene Dietrich. Rita Hayworth was someone with whom movie magazine readers could identify. And I think we see this today too, like with a lot of like influencers and stuff, the idea that you could start with nothing and then just by getting your face out there, you could become something.
I think that's exactly it. It's the idea of, oh, I could do this.
Yeah.
Right.
People like loved seeing this and seeing her in these magazines and hearing these stories about her and being like, oh, that it's not out of reach.
Right.
It's not out of reach. And so it's like, I think, like the parallel would be today when you see like influencers that end up on red carpets or, people that, start off with making YouTube videos and then they become directors and things, it's, it always fills people with this hope and excitement.
Very
and
American dreamy.
Yes. So people were super drawn to her, and especially with her, her family history and everything. And then this part of this makeover was Americanizing her, and people liked that and identified with that.
Definitely. And yet, even though she was Americanized in her appearance and her name, another really interesting part of this multiplicity of identities is that the two identities, so Margarita and Rita, existed simultaneously. One didn't replace the other.
Yeah.
And this is something that sets her apart from other stars too, because when we look at someone like Marilyn Monroe,
right,
who created this Marilyn Monroe persona, it's not as if Marilyn Monroe and Norma Jean existed simultaneously in the world's imagination.
Yeah.
It was only Marilyn.
Right.
Where Margarita Cancino never went away.
Right.
One of the interesting things that Adrienne McLean does in her book is she quotes a whole bunch of movie magazines and things throughout the 1940s and even 50s where she's still referred to as Margarita Cancino. So, in addition to Rita Hayworth.
Right.
So this never vanished.
Yeah, and according to McLean, her Spanish Latin identity gave her freedom of expression, then considered off limits for white women. McLean said Hayworth's film image always draws on the potency, the emotional aura of stereotypical assumptions about Latin sexuality, even when she plays all-American characters.
Yeah, that all-American white appearance gave her this, quote, unquenchable wholesomeness that made her safe as a leading lady, but she could successfully integrate eroticism and wholesomeness because of this divided identity. Really a cool take on this.
Yeah.
That I wouldn't have considered.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and we'll get into this a little bit more later too, but I think that was one of the things that really struck me when I watched Gilda, was that I went into it having heard about all this femme fatale stuff and and how, she was this, total babe and everything, I mean, for lack of a better word. And she's stunning. She's totally stunning. But I didn't really get the femme fatale. I got it a little bit, but underneath it all, there was this, layer of sweetness and shyness that, like, when I watched Gilda, I didn't really see Gilda. I saw Rita.
Yeah.
And we talked about this, that might also be a bit colored for me by having read Leeming's book first before watching Gilda, because then I went in with this strong image of who Rita was as a person. But at the same time, it's like they're really truly, like, down to the facts. There are scenes where she is just, you just want to hold her.
Yeah.
And other characters talk about it too. Like, there are other characters too that are fond of her. And what is it? Pio calls her, like, the little child or something.
The beautiful one.
The beautiful one and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Like,
I think
like,
it's her maid who calls her little one.
yeah. And
Right.
so it's like, I think it's important that those lines and those scenes are in there, because it is a huge part of Gilda as a character, I think, is that underneath it all, she just wants to be loved, much like Rita.
And that opening line, Gilda, are you decent?
Yeah.
She is.
Yeah.
She is. Like, she demonstrates by the end that this was all just a ruse. This was all just trying to make Johnny jealous.
Right.
That really, that wholesomeness is at her core. That decency is who
Right.
she really is. So you're right. I think that the Gilda is a good example of this successful integration of eroticism and wholesomeness that MacLean talks about.
Yeah, because I mean, there's like the scene, the like striptease, I'm doing finger air quotes, listeners, that people often think about, and they think about all these sexual qualities of that character. But I think it is important to also balance that with, again, the sweetness and shyness that Gilda shows at times.
Yeah.
And the vulnerability. I think that's the
Yeah,
word I've been
yeah,
looking
yeah,
for.
yeah.
There's a lot of vulnerability in her character as well, that I think is at odds with the concept of the femme fatale.
100%. Well, Edward Judson's creation of Rita Hayworth through publicity and physical transformation, it worked.
Yeah.
And we have him to thank
Yeah.
for that. But he was a terrible person.
Yeah.
He only saw her as a commodity.
Right.
He told her, as we said before, that he married her as an investment. And then when she decided she wanted to divorce him,
Yeah. This is this is why I have to find a way to go back in time so that I can fight him. Listeners, he threatened to throw acid in her face.
yeah,
He threatened to throw acid in her face because she asked for a divorce.
yeah. So he was going to destroy what he created, essentially.
He was like, I built you and I'll destroy you by throwing acid in your face. And like I said, it was so upsetting because then he turned people against her. He went to the media and played it up that he was, this poor guy and that he loved her so much and all this stuff and everything, and made her look like she was this, again, like difficult woman, as if she was the issue, when really she was trying to get away from the man that groomed and abused her.
And he wasn't the first horrible man to shape Rita Hayworth.
Unfortunately, as we know, which this is one of the things we really appreciated about Leeming's book, is that she really does an excellent job of diving into the psychology of Rita Hayworth's life and decisions as a victim of abuse, specifically of child sexual abuse, which is one of the huge connections we saw with Laura Palmer, of course.
Incest. It was her father, Eduardo Cancino. So Eduardo's influence on Hayworth is the very beginning of her divided, maybe we could say sundered self.
Yeah.
So Eduardo Cancino was born in Spain, and he trained with his 10 siblings as a dancer from early childhood. He and his sister Elisa became a pair, eventually known as the Dancing Cancinos, and immigrated to the United States in 1913. They eventually became a headline act in vaudeville and performed in Broadway musicals. Hayworth's mother, Volga Hayworth, gave up her own career as a showgirl in the Ziegfeld Follies when she married Eduardo. From the start, they were a family immersed deep in show business, and they moved to Hollywood in 1927 when Rita was 9 years old.
Margarita was trained as a dancer beginning from age 4. She was the only child who showed promise as a dancer, so Eduardo focused exclusively on her in a lot of ways, unfortunately. He pulled her from school at 12 to train. He was horrifically strict, physically abusive as a teacher, and that led her to becoming completely detached from other kids her age.
It was so sad to read about her sitting on the porch.
I know.
And her brothers and the other neighborhood kids would be playing, and she'd just sit there staring straight ahead. She wasn't allowed to interact with other kids.
Yeah, Leeming's book had a lot of accounts from people that grew up around her, like whether they were neighbor kids or friends of her brothers, who spoke to this and gave real accounts. And a lot of them said, like, in hindsight, they could even tell something was wrong. Like their child brains couldn't necessarily put the words to it, but they knew there was something really strange about the dynamic of that family, and they knew there was something really sad and troubled about Rita.
We all knew she was in trouble.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, really, it's, as we were reading all of this, it made me think of Laura so much.
Well, so and her formal education ends at 12. That becomes a lifelong insecurity for her.
Right. I mean, it was heartbreaking to hear in Leeming's book all these times that she felt so bad about herself because her literacy skills were so low because she just never got that education. And especially like when she was married to Orson Welles, because he was like so well read and everybody called him a genius and stuff. She wanted so badly to impress him. She would like try to read his books and secretly try to read the books that he had because she just wanted to fit in. She wanted to feel smart and capable like everyone else around her because that was stolen from her.
By a completely selfish, deranged father.
Yeah.
Yeah. So from the time she's barely a teenager, her father has her performing in Tijuana casinos as her father's dance partner. To make it worse, he deliberately obfuscates their relationship. She wasn't allowed to call him father in public. He liked the implication that they were a romantic couple.
Which is terrifying. She was like literally a child.
His daughter.
Not only a child, but his daughter. And he wanted people to think that they were a couple.
Right. And so it's the beginning of this divided self. She is a literal child, as you said, dancing as an adult. Yeah. There's this daughter being presented as a wife.
Right.
She's living this divided life from the time she's a little girl.
Yeah, he wanted her dancing like with like a sexual chemistry on stage with him and wanted people that would see them to think that that was his wife. And this is his daughter. And like think about the kind of way that would affect somebody's psyche, that this is happening at such a young age.
Lifelong psychological damage.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, she hated her father. She sought strong men and father figures throughout her life through 5 marriages.
Right. And this was something we had kind of nodded at earlier. So there's a connection to this in the movie You Were Never Lovelier, where the father in that film, like the father of her character, he starts writing her these love letters because he's trying to kind of like amp up her romantic life because her sisters are getting annoyed that she's never gonna date anybody or get married and stuff. So he gets it into his head to start writing her these love letters, these anonymous love letters from like a secret admirer, basically.
And then he's going to choose the man that she falls for.
Right.
He has this whole plan. And his name is Eduardo.
Yeah.
In the film.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's just like, but the concept of a father writing out this love letter for his daughter,
Yeah.
like personal love letter to his daughter. Like he does this whole thing where he's sending her orchids, and he's like, oh, and like, you're even more beautiful than an orchid. Like, this is the only flower that could really, encapsulate your beauty and all this kind of stuff and everything. And he's writing it to his daughter.
It's a really charming film.
I will say, of the movies that I watched, it is probably my favorite because she and Fred Astaire are very cute in it, and their
Yes.
dancing is great in it.
But when you know this backstory.
Yeah, it's like, I think if you were just watching it and not knowing any of that, it could be silly and fun, but knowing that she experienced that in her real life makes it kind of horrifying, because it's like, I think otherwise I would approach it kind of through like a Much Ado About Nothing lens almost. But yeah, it's unsettling when you know that her father actually acted like that.
Another complicated aspect of this, though, is that despite this terrible way that Rita Hayworth became a dancer, she had a fierce pride in this training and talent throughout her professional life. She was really proud of her lineage. A comment she made to Fred Astaire when, she hadn't done more than ballroom steps before You'll Never Get Rich. And he has her doing all these really complicated dance routines. And he says, oh, why didn't you tell me you weren't in shape, like physically ready to kind of dance this way? And she said, I'm a Cancino. Like, so she was really proud of this, even though she gained this skill under the worst of circumstances.
Right. And I mean, yeah, and as we kind of said, like, Astaire has spoken on that she is one of the best dancing partners he's ever had, because she was so talented.
Well, the abuse she suffered and this divided self meant that she was always insecure about herself, professionally and personally.
Yeah, to quote Leeming, Rita went through life secretly believing herself a fraud. No matter what her accomplishments, she was tormented by the nagging fear that at any moment she would be exposed and everyone would know the terrible truth about her inadequacies and unworthiness. Which is just heartbreaking. I mean, we're talking about a woman that people around the world said was the most beautiful woman in the world. She was an incredible dancer. She was a beloved actress and a dear friend to so many people.
At the end of her book, Adrienne McLean quotes Vincent Sherman, and this was heartbreaking to me. Hayworth was terribly underrated as an actress, and it was so sad. Not because she was tragic, but because of her belief that she needed more than she had. Man, it's a stab through the heart.
Yeah, and I mean, like, as we said, this was all, like, every step of her life. Like, so now, like, you've got the backstory of her father and her first husband. Like, everything about her life was decided for her.
Yes.
Everything was calculated and chosen for her. And she never chose really any of this. Like, repeatedly, she would tell people that she just wanted a quiet life. She just wanted a family. She just wanted a simple family life. And Orson Welles, again, this is one of her ex-husbands, said she didn't like being Rita Hayworth. She didn't believe in it. It was just work. She'd say, oh, it's a lot of nonsense. The moment I have a flop, I'll be nobody again. It wasn't an attitude. It was absolutely genuine. She wanted to escape from Rita Hayworth, but she had to earn a living. It's so sad because, I mean, that was all, especially because her education was stunted. That's all she really knew how to pursue. It was all she knew how to do was acting and dancing and performing. And it's not like she had the education to choose another career, really.
And at the same time, one of the things I like so much about Adrienne McLean's book is she emphasizes there, in addition to this truth that Orson Welles is saying, that Rita Hayworth was able to use that skill and that talent to escape from 5 bad marriages, because she is the one who filed for divorce every time. So she got involved with this series of, at worst, horrifically abusive, otherwise neglectful and philandering men, and every single time she was able to get herself out of that situation because of her skills.
Yeah.
Because of being able to be Rita Hayworth.
Right.
She could have agency in her personal life that wasn't really available to other women as easily at the time.
That is a very good point because, yeah, I mean, she did have at least like the access to like good lawyers also in a way that perhaps like a housewife wouldn't. And she did have her own money as well, even though some of her husbands certainly tried to take that away from her. And like we said, she never stopped fighting.
Right.
She was always working hard and always fighting. And I mean, that's, you know, a big part of her life is also that in her later years, she developed Alzheimer's. And that was one of the clear signs that people saw that something was wrong because she couldn't remember her lines and she couldn't perform in the way that she used to be able to. And so people that were close to her and coworkers that had worked with her previously and stuff, like people were noticing like, that's not normal.
Yeah.
Rita's not like that. Rita knows what she's doing and she works so hard and she's so good at this.
She's such a professional.
Yeah.
Under all circumstances.
Yes. And so the idea of her not being able to perform or remember her lines or her moves or things like that, that was one of those things that set people off that something must seriously be going wrong.
We're going to talk more about that stage of her life later in the episode for sure. But to move on to Gilda specifically, it's interesting that the divided self in Rita Hayworth is also evident in the early roles that she played. Sometimes she'd be the femme fatale Spider-Woman character, and then other times she'd be this wholesome film musical character, you know, playing with Fred Astaire, this all-American girl. But in Gilda, these divided roles merged into one character.
Right. And so Gilda's character, it's important to note that the screenplay was also co-written by producer Virginia Van Upp.
Yeah, she's not credited.
Yeah. And that was something I didn't know until we were reading the book Gilda, a BFI book by Melvin Stokes. And I thought that was super interesting to know that a woman was involved in the writing. And I think that does totally lend to the complex, layered, independent, sexually liberated, and still wholesome character. I mean, it's what we talk about with David all the time, is being able to write these complex female characters as a man is really impressive. And so it makes sense that there was a woman involved in this, I think.
Yeah.
Especially for that time period.
And I also read that it was in part because Humphrey Bogart backed out very early in the development of the film because he didn't think there was any way that he could be more impressive than Rita Hayworth in this. And so once he backed out, they had the freedom to retool the script to emphasize Gilda's character more and kind of add more dimension to her, since she really was going to be, I think, the main protagonist. I know that we have the voiceovers from Johnny.
But I mean, it's like it's even named for her.
Yeah, and Johnny is just wrong about her.
Right.
So his voiceovers really don't have that kind of authoritative insight. And I think we, the audience, realize Johnny is wrong.
Yeah.
Even at the point, we're not going to summarize the movie here.
Right,
We're going to assume you know it. But even at the point where he has that fake marriage to her and he's going to punish her.
Yeah.
We're 100% on Gilda's side.
Right.
There.
Right. Like, yeah, like the whole time you're just watching it and being like, excuse me, what? Like, you got Gilda and you're acting this way? Yeah, I mean, Gilda is a divided self, performing this kind of bad girl role without actually being one. She isn't a femme fatale.
No.
I have a quote from Stokes, that BFI book we were just mentioning. Yet there is something about Gilda that undermines the idea of her as a man-eating femme fatale. As played by Hayworth, she is too superstitious to take much pleasure from the havoc she creates, knowing all too well, as she tells Maria, her maid, that sins and excesses have to be paid for. True femme fatales are unconcerned with other people, whereas Gilda has the capacity to provoke great loyalty from others. And this was something that we mentioned earlier. Maria and Uncle Pio both address her affectionately as Little One. Gilda also lacks the intense narcissism of many movie sirens. Discussing Johnny with Balin while getting ready for dinner in the casino, she barely glances at her reflection in the mirror.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah.
There's an essay by Richard Dyer from 1970, actually, called Resistance Through Charisma, Rita Hayworth and Gilda. And he argues that it's her dancing also that makes her, he said, no other femme fatale dances. And that kind of joyful self-expression that we see in her dance gives her life and dimension. The fundamental quality, in his words, of a femme fatale is her unknowability.
Yeah.
And that Gilda is not unknowable.
No, she's very vulnerable at times too, because we've both talked about the scene where she's just singing and playing guitar.
Yeah.
It's a very vulnerable moment, and it gives her this incredible sweetness, I feel. When I watched that scene, it read the same to me as Audrey Hepburn singing on the fire escape in Breakfast at Tiffany's. It gave me that same feeling where you get this, because it's the same thing too with that character where it's, you know, she's running around with all these guys and she's never staying in one place very long and stuff. And then you have this moment where she's just sweetly singing. She's just got a guitar and she's just singing very simply.
That is a wonderful comparison.
Yeah, that was like the total vibe that I got when I first watched that scene. I was like, oh, it's just like Audrey. And I want to be there with her. I want to be in that room with her. Because it feels like, it feels like a secret almost or something. Like it feels like something that you weren't necessarily meant to see. Like you're stumbling upon it. It's just this quiet, tender moment.
It really is. Uncle Pio is just looking at her with utmost devotion and reverence. And another really interesting layer here is that is the only time we hear Rita Hayworth's actual singing voice.
Right.
In every other film, and even in the other songs in Gilda, she's lip syncing.
Right, which is crazy because, and this was brought up in Stokes' book as well, that a lot of people were surprised because people that had heard her sing, and she would sing for the troops and stuff too. And people went on to say that she had a perfectly lovely voice. Yeah. So there was never really any reason to dub her. But they kept doing it.
It's interesting because so to go on with what you're saying there about this very sweet, like observed moment, that feels very appropriate then to that it's her true voice.
Yeah.
She's just there with a guitar and one person listening to her. And it's the same song that she does this notorious, and again, I'll use air quotes, striptease. Later,
you have to do the air quotes.
She only removes one glove.
Right, which is another thing that gets brought up in Stokes' books, and I think it's a great point because so a lot of people, again, when they talk about this, they call this a striptease. She takes off one glove. The quote from Stokes is, "I remembered her as stripping off both her gloves and tossing them into the audience. In fact, as I realized from reviewing the film, she takes off only one during the actual dance and drops it on the floor." Writer Jerome Charon said in his nostalgic tribute to the Hollywood Dream Factory, confesses to making the same mistake. We had both imagined a fantasy of Gilda's behavior rather than the real thing. Yet in many ways, this was symptomatic of Gilda as a whole. It rested heavily on what people wanted to see and what, despite or perhaps because of the Hays Code, they sometimes believed they had seen.
I had that exact quote marked as well. Yes.
Because it sums it up so well. It's like so many people have this image of Gilda as like this total sex pot, this bombshell, and nothing super crazy happens. Like really, it's pretty tame overall. And also, this is something that plagued Rita for her whole life and her personal life as well. This was something that they got this idea of Gilda, and that drew them to her. And then they found that she was this shy, sweet woman. Orson Welles and Ali Khan both became obsessed and fascinated with this idea of her that was not the real her. They saw an image of her and they decided that's what they wanted, and they pursued her like crazy. And then when they got her, they were both surprised that she was actually just very shy and quiet.
I know a quote that's very famously associated with her is, "Men go to bed with Gilda, but wake up with me."
Yeah. And I can't stop thinking about that quote. Like ever since I had heard it before, but I didn't know all the context.
Yeah.
And then having read Li Ming's book and done more research into Rita Hayworth, it's so heartbreaking because, again, all she ever really wanted was for someone to see her as she was and love her. But everybody came to her with these preconceived notions of her.
Yeah.
They had her on this weird pedestal and had this idea of who she was that was just never going to be who she was. And she tried. She really tried. When she and Orson Welles first got together, she found out that he was really into like nice lingerie. And even though that was really outside of her personality, she started wearing it. And like for Ali Khan, he really wanted the princess. He wanted her to be this socialite that would host all these parties with him and everything. And she wasn't really a party girl. She just wanted a quiet life. She thought that they were just going to have a sweet little family together. And instead she had to constantly be around these strangers that she didn't want to be around and host all these huge parties that just made her uncomfortable.
Yeah. And Gilda really is the launching point for this. Yeah.
And it set like it truly, it's like it set off like a domino effect.
It did.
Of all these things that just led to so much discomfort for her.
An interesting thing is, though, I think both of us had such a different perception of that so-called striptease scene.
Yeah.
I didn't see it as reading about it, affecting the sexual awakening of generations of young men was quite shocking to me because when I'm watching it, I see her desperation.
Right.
Gilda is a woman who has been thwarted and frustrated. She tries to escape from Johnny. She goes off on her own to Montevideo to get a job. She's trying to run away. He brings her back. Yeah. And so this put the blame on Mame dance is she's just desperate for love, for escape, for whatever. And then it gets scary.
Right. And also she's singing, the song that she's singing is about men blaming women for basically everything and things that are out of their control, which is a whole other level of that. That adds like a whole other layer on top of that.
It's the antithesis of the femme fatale.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Right. But yeah, as you were starting to say, it's like, honestly, that scene is really alarming.
Yes.
Like it starts to get, the men are like animals. They start
after
just
the
like
song.
Yeah, they just start like clamoring over to her and like pawing at her, and like you can actually see the women in the audience looking uncomfortable and scared and confused.
They enjoy the dance.
Yeah, everybody enjoys the dance. And then the men start trying to take her clothes off.
Yeah.
And like run up to her and try to like unzip her dress. Like she kind of jokes at it, and then they start like running up to do it. And that's the point where the women in the audience start looking afraid. Because if you were out to dinner with your husband and you watch him see this woman performing and then he runs up to try to rip off her clothes, you know that at any moment you could be next.
Yes.
You know that you are about to be a woman in trouble as well, because that is not a safe man.
Gosh, that's such a good point. It goes from being entertainment and spectacle to revealing some sort of dark animalistic undercurrent that is like right there beneath the surface.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like an honestly very alarming scene.
So I don't see that scene the way I guess generations of young men have at all. Well, I was really interested to read then, though, that Gilda wasn't really conceived of as a male fantasy. It was created as a woman's movie
Right.
in the highly gendered Hollywood of the time.
Yeah.
And Mark Jankovic, in his article Vicious Womanhood, Genre, the Femme Fatale in Post-War America, he said that Gilda is not a male fantasy but a woman's film in which Hayworth's dance does not conform to male fantasy, but parodies them. Do you see that? That that's a parody of fantasy in a way?
I mean, I think that was one of the things that I did appreciate a lot about Stokes's book is that it went into a lot of the little nuances of the film, because that book is entirely focused on Gilda.
Yeah.
While I don't necessarily agree with some of the things he said about Rita Hayworth in her personal life, it was very fascinating, some of the stuff that he brought up about the film. So I think knowing all these things that went into the film and all of the working around the Hays Code and everything, I think that there's a lot of cleverness and there's a lot of careful decisions they had to make to work around that in particular, and all of the decency stuff at the time, because I hadn't even thought about that, and that book goes into detail about a lot of the workarounds they had to do and a lot of the scenes they had to change and lines they had to change to appease that. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of careful cleverness about Gilda.
Well, I think that idea that Gilda parodies male fantasies instead of conforming to them, that felt right to me. That felt true to what I was seeing. But then I read an essay by Svea Becker called A Femme Fatale Communicates Through Dance that really described it well. She's a scholar of dance. So she described Hayworth's Put the Blame on Mame dance really differently than the conventional striptease. Becker notes that the dance doesn't use recognizable dance steps and instead relies on feelings and emotions. She analyzes the movement patterns of the dance, the scattering and gathering motions, and the radiating of energy outward from Hayworth's center to argue that Gilda cannot be a Spider-Woman femme fatale. Instead, in Becker's words, the dance indicates that she has access to physical desire, that she is an open, warm, generous, loving person desperate to communicate. When Gilda dances, Becker writes, we realize that Gilda is not a sexual object, but a real person.
Yeah, this was something that, again, Stokes' book is very interesting, going into a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff. And one of the things that he mentions is that there was a really tight shooting schedule. And there was a lot of just improvised rehearsal time. And honestly, I think part of why we get that kind of energy and that emotion is because we're really just getting Rita, because she had to improvise a lot there. Stokes writes, Jean-Louis had designed a special black strapless satin dress for the number, but neither the director nor the rest of the crew knew how she was going to look in the morning of the actual shoot. As Vidor recalled, Hayworth made the most of their surprise. She sauntered on the stage, holding her head up high in that magnificent way she does, stepping along like a sleek young tiger cub, and the whistles that sounded would have shamed a canary's convention. She enjoyed every second of it. Then she did that elaborate, difficult mame number in 2 takes. She just, they were really rushing to get that dress done. They didn't know how she was really going to move in it, too, because it's pretty tight. Yeah, so it was just they kind of had to rush that all together. They got her in the dress, and she couldn't have practiced in the dress, really.
Wow. Yeah.
And then she did it in 2 takes, and that's just Rita. So I think that especially if we're talking about what draws you in, perhaps, is the emotion there in the way that she's moving, and that energy, that's Rita.
Yeah, that's a great point. So the reason that she comes across as a real person in Becker's words is because she is.
She's not doing a choreographed dance per se there. She's improvising because they had a general idea of what they wanted her to do. They didn't have the dress yet for her to practice in costume to see how she could move in it.
That's fantastic.
So I think that might be a big part of why. That actual Rita magic of bringing a real person and her real self into it for a bit.
Yeah. Well, from one perspective, Gilda is the place where the divided Rita Hayworth comes together.
Yeah.
But I mean, from Barbara Leaming's perspective, Gilda is also something else. To quote her, a film that would forever after identify her with the sex symbol image that she was hoping to put behind her. Gilda was, in a way, a confession of defeat, a sign that the dreams she had shared with Orson Welles had not come to fruition.
Yeah.
You know, so this idea that it is both the permanent divide in her, and it is also the death of a dream, I think sets it up very well for Mulholland Drive.
Yeah. And then we have the bomb also, which was really upsetting to her.
Yes.
So on July 1st, 1946, as a part of the Operation Crossroads nuclear tests, the United States dropped a bomb in Bikini Atoll they'd named Gilda after Hayworth's character. And they had even put like a little picture of her on it too.
On the nuclear bomb.
Which she was so upset about.
She went crazy,
Like-
in Orson Welles' words.
Yeah. He said that she was so insanely upset about it. And he like tried to like calm her about it and stuff and be like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. And she was like, no, it is.
Well, and I can understand because she is this person who people say her essential quality is sweetness.
Right.
She only wants to help people and be kind to people. And now her image is on a nuclear bomb.
Yeah.
It couldn't be more antithetical to who she was.
It's something so evil and destructive and harmful.
It also makes it very Lynchian.
Yeah, it makes it, I mean, that's the thing, is it, again, everything's connected.
And I couldn't help but note that bomb was dropped from the B-29 superfortress called Dave's Dream.
So, as we said at the beginning of the episode, we approached this from the beginning. We were just looking at Gilda, and then once we started to understand how much more of a connection there is with Rita Hayworth, that kind of took us in a whole new direction.
We have like 3 bullet points here about Gilda specifically. And we just paused recording to decide we're not going to talk about them.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about Judy. But I mean, a huge part of this is honestly just the decision that she makes to name herself Rita instead of Gilda. Like, whenever they're in the apartment and she sees the poster, and in that moment of panic, Gilda's the big name there.
Yeah.
Like, Gilda, it like, that's a name as well. She could have named herself Gilda, but she chooses Rita, and this feels important.
Absolutely.
Because she's not Gilda, she's Rita.
Yes. And the presentation of Rita Hayworth on that poster, the Gilda part is incidental.
Yeah.
This is really about Rita Hayworth.
Right. Because one of the, I think, most basic connections we can make, you know, from the get-go is that people talk all the time about how Mulholland Drive is a film that so very much addresses how Hollywood treats women, and how, you know, it chews them up and spits them out. And we totally see that with Rita Hayworth. That was like a classic example of that, going back to like old Hollywood, like right from the get-go. Harry Cohn, who was in charge of Columbia, was just an absolute nightmare to her. There were so many skeevy, awful men in the film industry that made her life a nightmare and made things so difficult for her. And I think if we want to talk about Mulholland Drive, we're talking about Rita more than we're talking about Gilda.
Yeah, just on that very basic thematic level in Mulholland Drive,
Yeah.
it does fit Rita Hayworth much better than the character of Gilda.
Right. It's more about her life and her experiences than it is about Gilda.
My thought on the inclusion of a poster for Gilda, though, is because of the quote that's on that poster.
Yeah.
So it's one of several posters that was produced for that film, Gilda. And importantly, this one says, there never was a girl like Gilda. I think that choice is there to inject into the film the idea of a girl that doesn't exist
Right.
right away. So more than it's about Gilda the character or Gilda the film, it's this idea that Gilda never existed, in all caps. There never was a girl like Gilda. And as you just said, she picks the name Rita.
Right.
Yeah.
And like, I think that is a perfect connection, because the characters that we have, it's just like, who is real? Mm-hmm. Who is the real here?
So many divided selves.
Yes. And
Yes.
and so I think that is a great connection, because that is so true. It's like, who are any of these girls real?
Do any of them exist?
Does anybody exist?
There never was a girl like Betty. Right. Well, on this viewing of Mulholland Drive, I was looking for those little details that are related to Rita Hayworth. And this time I noticed the portrait on the wall that appears in Aunt Ruth's apartment several times in several shots, one very notably right between Betty and Rita. And I just Googled it. It's Beatrice Cenci, a 16th century Italian noblewoman imprisoned and repeatedly raped by her father as a child.
Yeah, you sent me.
Oh my gosh.
It was, listeners, Hilary sent me the link to the Wikipedia page for this and was like, oh my God, I just found another thing. They show this portrait multiple times. Please just look at this. And I opened the link, and within reading the first 2 sentences of the Wikipedia page, I was like, oh my God. Okay, yeah. Already huge connection here.
Yeah.
Easily able to connect this.
An obvious connection to Rita Hayworth. Yeah. Even when Rita comes out of the shower, and Betty's talking to her about her Aunt Ruth, Betty's comment is, she has pretty red hair. Odd thing to say, but that's Rita Hayworth also.
Right.
Rita Hayworth.
She was known for it.
Yes. That beautiful auburn hair.
Which, again, was perfectly calculated and curated.
Mm-hmm. The casting of Laura Elena Herring as Rita/Camila is pretty interesting too, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, so because she herself she's a Mexican-American actress. She's also trained in Latin dance. She listed tango and yoga as her interests. And she was the first Latina woman to win Miss USA in 1985 as Miss Texas.
Yeah, and a cowgirl was her national costume at the Miss Universe pageant, and Gilda, her carnival costume is a gaucho. Pretty interesting.
And also, she was briefly a countess by marriage, and Hayworth was briefly a princess.
I really love that. So it feels like there are echoes in Laura Elena Herring's background to Rita Hayworth in interesting ways.
And honestly, I can see some physical similarities between them
Sure.
too. I mean, just kind of the cut of the jaw and everything, face shape. I think it's so intentional. It feels so intentional.
The character who she plays at the beginning as Rita, she's passive, quiet, fearful. She's so much like the real Rita Hayworth.
Right.
You know?
Another connection is just with the amnesia. Honestly, it's a strong parallel for Alzheimer's. I mean, that struggle for memory, we've both talked about, we have both had family members with it. So we've seen it firsthand. And there's a lot of parallels there, that just the helplessness and confusion and fear that comes with that. It's in the scenes where Rita is really struggling to remember things and struggling to figure out who she is, that could totally read as an Alzheimer's patient.
Any other time I've seen Mulholland Drive, I didn't think of that.
Yeah, me either.
But reading about Rita Hayworth's life and learning what she was like at the end of it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I saw then that fearfulness,
Yeah.
the paranoia,
Yeah.
all of those things so typical with Alzheimer's.
Right.
It definitely added another layer.
And that also kind of childlike quality at
Yes.
times, sort of needs to be guided around and aided and protected and stuff. We totally see that with Rita in Mulholland Drive. Betty is basically her caretaker.
Yes.
In a way.
Yes. Now, as Camila, Laura Elena Herring is the opposite, of course. She's
Right.
brazen, erotic, manipulative, cruel. She is so much like Doña Sol, who was Rita Hayworth's character in Blood and Sand. So that's a character who really enjoyed flaunting her new lovers in the face of the just jilted, and in Doña Sol's case, man. But then again, on this viewing of Mulholland Drive, I paused during the car scene with Camila and Adam Kesher. And I looked up Doña Sol and I realized they are styled
Yeah.
the same.
Yeah. I have the side-by-side picture comparisons in front of me, which I'll post, listeners, and it is uncanny.
I think it's deliberate.
100%. It has to be.
The same kind of up-down hairstyle.
and the pearls.
It's a
everything.
triple layer, a triple strand of pearls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is very specific.
And that same kind of enjoying, I want Diane to stay.
Yeah.
To see this, like
I want
flaunting
you
it.
to see this.
That's so Doña Sol.
Yeah.
Yeah. But do we think that the Rita Hayworth connections stop with this Rita Camila character?
No, because I think we both see this in multiple characters. And Betty Diane is another version of that as well. We've got Betty as like this bright, optimistic, ambitious, a lot like Hayworth's roles in musicals, where it's less of the femme fatale and stuff.
Oh yeah, this like wide-eyed, all-American,
Yeah.
although she's Canadian. This very kind of bright ingenue character.
Right.
Very much who Hayworth played in the musicals.
Right. And then this like success as a dancer leading you to Hollywood is like a crazy connection. Like Hayworth danced jitterbug infused dances and You Were Never Lovelier. And as we've said, like Hayworth was known as a dancer first. That's what got her into Hollywood to start with.
Yeah. I also think that ability to turn on eroticism as a performer that we see in Betty at
Definitely.
the audition.
Yeah. Because
That's
it's like a switch. It's like a crazy switch.
right. And that's so Rita Hayworth.
Yeah.
In real life, that she goes from being, as Hermes Pan said, this 8-year-old girl, and then the camera turns on and she's this ruthless seductress.
Yeah, she just locks in. As soon as the camera turns, she's ready to go and be this character, but that's not who she necessarily is outside of that.
You know, another thing I noticed on this viewing of Mulholland Drive was that Betty apologizes constantly. You know, Rita is in her apartment. She's a stranger taking a shower in her apartment, and Betty cannot stop apologizing to her.
Right, that's so true. Yeah, she's literally like, she's like, like maybe I've made a mistake.
Yeah, and even when Rita comes out of the shower and Betty's like, "So, how do you know my aunt?" And then she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry."
Yeah.
And the chronic apologizing is very much a fawn response,
100%.
typical of a victim of abuse.
Definitely.
I recently saw the film Obsession,
Yeah.
and one of the really striking things about Nikki's character in that, when she's in her altered state, is how much she apologizes. Oh, I'm sorry. And when we see Betty doing that too. So although I tend to read Betty as very courageous and optimistic and all of this, the chronic apologizing,
Right.
very interesting.
Definitely. Yeah. No, I can definitely see that. And then also with Diane, we have this like hurt, betrayed, lost, desperate self that Rita was also often in her personal life. I mean, her husband's it's infuriating. Like imagine, especially with Orson Welles and Prince Ali Khan, these men pursued her
Yes.
so fiercely. They were so obsessed with her. They said like, I gotta have this woman. Like they get this image in their head of who she is, and they did all these things to woo her, and then they finally get her. They get this woman that men all over the world think is the most beautiful woman they've ever seen. Everyone's in love with her. Everyone's obsessed with her. They finally get her, and she's unbelievably devoted.
Yes.
All she's ever wanted in her life, because of this childhood of abuse, is to be loved and to have a family. And She loves them fiercely. She totally adores them. She'd do anything for them. And to all accounts, she was a very, like, to her, sex was a huge expression of love. That was like her love language. And so it's not like they were lacking in the bedroom. And yet they cheated on her. Yes. So much. They cheated on her so much. They got exactly what they wanted and then decided they were bored. And I mean, Orson Welles would talk about, and other people in their lives would talk about Rita crying and stuff. Like it was like she would be audibly weeping in the next room whenever like Orson would have like writing meetings and stuff with people. This was something that Leeming had talked about. And because she just was so devastated. Like she's giving like as I kind of said earlier, she tried so hard to mold herself to be what these men wanted out of her. She was willing to do anything for them and be whatever they wanted, and they still kept cheating on her and breaking her heart.
Yes, breaking her heart over and over again. You know,
and it's such a slap in the face.
Right.
It really does carry that strong pain that Diane has, I think.
Yeah, like Diane's character is a raw expression in a way of that inner turmoil. You know, Rita Hayworth, for the most part, was always polished and beautiful on the outside. But on the inside, this is who she was, constantly betrayed, abandoned, insecure. Right. So I love and hate that. Like, I love seeing that in Mulholland Drive, and I hate that for Rita Hayworth.
Right. She just deserved better.
So much. It's interesting how you said that they both had images of her and pursued them. Orson Welles literally saw, there's a famous Life magazine photo of Rita Hayworth that became like a pinup on every World War II soldier's wall, where she's like kneeling on a bed. Yep. Orson Welles saw that photo when he was working in South America, and essentially said, oh, this is the girl.
Yeah, basically.
Like, I'm going to find her and marry her.
Literally, and he did. And because she was not interested at first, and he pursued her like crazy. And then Ali Khan did the same thing, where he saw her in Gilda, and he became obsessed with her. And he pursued her. There was like a point where he literally like flew a jet or like a plane or something in front of like her hotel window, I think.
Yes.
To try to impress her, and she wasn't even there. And he did all these things to try to impress her, and then he went around and cheated on her.
Yeah. Viewing Mulholland Drive with this in mind, I started noticing indications that maybe all four of these women are the same person. So, for one thing, there's that phone call where they call Diane's number.
Yeah.
And they're thinking that they're calling Rita.
Right.
And Betty says, it's strange to be calling yourself, or something like that.
Yeah.
I also noticed that after the sex scene, there's that beautiful shot of both of their faces, Betty and Betty and Rita. And their faces are merged in such a way that it looks very intimate, but also the eye and mouth placement suggests oneness, like it's one face almost. Really interesting. And then after the Club Silencio scene, when Betty disappears, she puts down the blue box and is gone. Rita faces that transition alone. She's completely absent. Just as Rita was alone at the beginning of the film at the car accident.
Right.
Then she's alone there too.
Yeah.
As if the Betty persona has like been absorbed into her.
Right.
In that moment. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think, again, like, that's the beauty of David's work, is there's a million ways to read it.
Yeah.
And every time you watch it, you're going to pick up new things. And you're going to be able to make different connections. And I think that is a thing that people talk about all the time with Mulholland Drive, is the, like, who is real?
Yeah.
What is real? What is the real version? Who is actually real in this? And
whose dream is it?
Yeah, who is the dreamer?
Yeah.
And we also saw connections with Orson Welles, with his relationship to Rita in correlation with Mulholland Drive, because Orson Welles was known as sort of like a defiant boy genius director who often clashed with kind of the dark forces within and around Hollywood, which we really see with Adam Kesher.
Oh, yeah.
And that was a huge thing that affected Rita's life as well. Because, I mean, obviously, if you're married to someone, then, you know, their troubles sort of become yours as well. But, like, she got put on, like, watch lists and stuff.
The FBI
like,
watch
it was
list.
really scary, honestly. Like, reading those parts of it, of her life in Leeming's book, it was crazy because that was like around the time that there was a lot of McCarthyism and stuff that was going on. And so it was just like a bad time. It was just a bad time. And everybody was being watched and everybody was under suspicion, especially like anybody that was like progressive and liberal in any way. And Orson Welles was really outspoken.
Well, and he got in trouble with Citizen Kane. You
Yeah.
know, William Randolph Hearst really came after him and tried to ruin him in Hollywood after that.
Yeah.
So those dark forces around Hollywood definitely had an influence on his life and career. But Rita Hayworth put up $30,000 of her own money to get him work on, I think it was The Stranger,
Yeah.
that she had paid for that, essentially. You know, just... It was her guarantee. You know, he would play
Right.
nice with the studio.
Yeah, and it was like so hard for him to work within the tight constraints of Hollywood, and then also it affected Rita's life in the way that Harry Cohn, he was totally obsessed with her. Like he used to like bug her dressing rooms and stuff. Like this man was dangerously, scarily obsessed with her. He hated her relationships with anyone, like anyone in general, because he wanted to have this like full possession of her, as if she was just like an object, and that she belonged to him. But he hated her relationship with Orson Welles because it was like, you know, she was kind of getting her mind opened in some ways, I think, with that relationship. And Harry Cohn did not like the idea of potentially losing her in any way.
Yeah. You already mentioned the audible weeping that she would do, you know, in front of Orson Welles, essentially as he's working. She also drove really recklessly in the winding roads above the Hollywood Hills.
Yeah.
Orson Welles would go with her.
Yeah.
In these moments of distress, because of course he was cheating on her with other Hollywood stars, with a succession of sex workers.
He cheated on her with Judy Garland.
I know.
Which is crazy.
So
Everything's connected.
she'd be driving in these winding roads, and Orson Welles said he thought she had a death wish.
Yeah.
So the idea that Mulholland Drive opens with an accident on the winding roads above Hollywood.
There's just there's so much. There's so much that can be tied in. And then, as we kind of mentioned earlier at the very beginning when we were talking about things that we would encourage you to watch, in Lady from Shanghai, that was a film that she did with Orson Welles. And he changed her a lot for it too, which was kind of a big deal at the time. That was another thing that Harry Cohn was really upset about, because she had that Rita Hayworth look, and he, like, once again, she got changed. Her look got changed by a man.
She had to become someone else.
Yeah.
He cut off all of her hair and dyed it platinum blonde. How Mulholland Drive does that sound?
I know, like, truly, and it's like that cut too, like of the wigs, kind of.
In Adrienne McLean's book, she says, in the presence of some 16 photographers, her famous red hair was cropped short and bleached to a platinum blonde, a stunt that Maurice Bessy would dub the execution of Rita Hayworth and the birth of the new Rita. So the simultaneous killing of the old Rita and a birth of a new one at the hands of Orson Welles by cutting off her hair and bleaching it.
Right.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, really, like the really short blonde cut, it's so much like how we have Rita looking in like the Silencio scene at that point. Yeah.
And it was totally unnecessary. The weird thing
Yeah.
is the short story that Lady from Shanghai was based on.
Yeah.
Elsa Bannister's character has auburn long hair.
Yeah. Which, like, so then Perfect. You cast the right actress and then you changed her look for no reason.
Right. The Lady from Shanghai is interesting for so many reasons. It's like Orson Welles is working out his guilt about his relationship with Rita Hayworth throughout it.
Yeah,
But
100%.
But the thing that is extremely relevant to Mulholland Drive is the Hall of Mirrors shootout scene at the end, where you have Elsa and her husband firing at each other in a hall of mirrors in a funhouse.
Yeah, because it's very disorienting. It's very chaotic, and like just everything's very fractured. Obviously,
Literally,
because of like the mirrors and everything. It's so fractured.
And they're firing at reflections of each other and also at each other. And so this idea of like the divided self, the multiplicity of images, it is perfect for Rita Hayworth. Fits beautifully with Mulholland Drive.
Definitely.
And I think even when we first see Rita in Mulholland Drive looking at the poster of Gilda, you know, she's reflected in a mirror. And then Rita Hayworth is reflected in a mirror next to her. So it's almost hinting at that Lady from Shanghai scene, which is very, very famous.
Yeah.
Of like all these different reflections side by side.
Right. And then again, like that goes back to just that question of like, what's real? What is the reality? There's all these fake selves as reflections in the mirror, and who is the real one?
Well, after she divorced Orson Welles, Hayworth married Prince Ali Khan. When I was watching Mulholland Drive this time and noticed in that transformation scene, they put scissors down on a copy of a book called To Paris. And that phrase refers to the social elite, the jet set of Paris, exactly the class that Khan ran with. I don't know. It seems really interesting that in this moment of transformation in Mulholland Drive, there's this gentle allusion to this moment of transition in Rita Hayworth's life, too.
Right.
She desperately tried to fit in with that class and could not. But then the camera pans hair accessories and 2 auburn wigs. Right there.
Right.
Rita's signature color right there in Mulholland Drive in this scene.
Yeah. And then probably one of our biggest Orson Welles connections is going to be his Mercury Wonder Show and Club Silencio. So Orson Welles was an amateur magician who trained with Harry Houdini and performed first with Dolores Del Rio, important name, at the California State Fair. In 1941, after he was deemed ineligible for military service due to medical issues, Welles channeled his guilt about his inability to serve into creating this show. He was living with Hayworth as he developed the Mercury Wonder Show and trained her to be his assistant, teaching her his illusions. She loved it. This was like she was finally playing with the other kids in a way that she never got to do as a child. She had so much fun doing this. This was something that brought her so much excitement and joy. And she just like loved getting to hang out with his friends and like finally have a friend group. She finally felt like she had her little circle that she always wanted.
It was beautiful.
And it's interesting, one of the tricks that she did with him that was really important was he would do the like sawing somebody in half trick, like the classic magician trick, but it's also like a perfect expression of the divided self.
Yeah. As part of the trick, he is sawing in half this woman who has been sundered her entire life.
Yeah, always feeling divided and then physically being divided.
Yes. Well, unfortunately for Hayworth, she only got to do one performance because Harry Cohn in Columbia made her quit.
Of course. Because again, he wanted to control everything about her and he hated that she was getting this freedom out of her relationship with Orson Welles.
So she was replaced by Marlene Dietrich. And listeners, if you want to see what this was like, there is a film called Follow the Boys from 1947. Around the 57-minute mark of that film, you can see Orson Welles and Marlene Dietrich recreate part of the Mercury Wonder Show. Pretty neat. Last year, on Creamed Corn in the Universe, Colin interviewed Richard Green, the actor who plays the magician in Mulholland Drive. And in that interview, Green explained how he first met David Lynch when he was still working on Eraserhead. And Green was performing a, quote, evil magician from the 1850s act that he developed. Many years later, when Lynch was working on Mulholland Drive, he asked Catherine Coulson to call their mutual friend to ask for, quote, this guy we all used to know who was really good with words and used to be a magician. It was Green, of course. And listeners, if you have not had a chance to listen to that interview that Colin did last year, oh my gosh, please go seek it out. It's just marvelous. Green also stated in that interview that Lynch developed the Club Silencio scene as part of the closed ending for the pilot Mulholland Drive was originally intended to be. If the pilot failed, they'd release it in Europe with that closed ending of the Club Silencio scene.
Already, I think people know that scene is incredibly important to Mulholland Drive. But like the idea of that potentially being like kind of like finale sort of note, or like, you know, like that's where he leaves you, that adds even another layer to it, I think.
It sure does. I think this combination of an 1850s magician being good with words is also so Orson Welles.
Yeah.
He was a masterful orator.
Yeah, he was known for it. And he even got involved in politics because of it. Politicians asked him to get involved because he was so good at speaking.
So if David Lynch was seeking an Orson Welles-like figure for this, Richard Green was perfect.
Yeah.
For that.
And then we also have Rebecca Del Rio.
Yes.
And so that is not her original last name. It was Rebecca Coronado. But she adopted the name Del Rio when she started singing professionally. Why?
We don't know.
We don't know. But perhaps evoking Dolores Del Rio?
And interestingly, Rita Hayworth was cast originally as maybe she'll be the next Dolores Del Rio.
And also, I think a big thing that we talk about, that we kind of mentioned earlier, is how through most of her career, Rita Hayworth had her songs dubbed, and she was just lip syncing. And so, like, obviously, like, this is Rebecca Del Rio singing, but it is her lip syncing for this scene.
Right.
And so for that to be such a huge part of Hayworth's career, it just feels like for her to be dubbed in pretty much every film, even though she could sing and like by all accounts had a good voice, people said she did. It just feels really, really interesting that that's how things play out in Club Silencio as well.
Even the way Rebecca Del Rio appears in that scene, her hair looks sort of reddish auburn.
It does a bit.
And her skin is very pale. It's hard to tell if it's lighting or if she's been altered because it's very bright light as well. But again, we have a Latin actress appearing paler and with lighter hair than she does naturally.
Right.
And lip syncing a song she sang herself.
Right.
I think the lyrics of that song too. You know, it's Crying by Roy Orbison, importantly sung in Spanish.
Yeah.
A language Rita Hayworth could speak.
Right.
And the lyrics of that song could easily come from Rita Hayworth to Orson Welles.
Right. It's so heartbreaking, and it's this calling out, this reaching out. Yeah.
I mentioned this to you before we started recording, that this time when I watched Mulholland Drive, the Club Silencio scene came on and Rebecca Del Rio started singing, and I got my usual like 1 or 2 tears in the corners of my eyes.
Yeah.
And then I full on started ugly crying, sobbing. And it was the first time I had such a dramatic emotional response to Mulholland Drive, where I have that all the time with Fire Walk with Me.
Yeah.
And I think that, I know that this time I was thinking about Rita Hayworth.
Yeah.
And I was looking at Rebecca Del Rio's face. Her eyes have that look that you've been crying for so long that your eyes don't even feel like they're part of your body anymore.
Right.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
There's just the rawness and pain in her face and in her voice as she sings that song, connecting that emotionally with this woman who we've been reading about and thinking about for the last 6 weeks and just falling in love with.
Right.
It was the first time I've cried for Rita Hayworth. It was the first time I've cried that hard at Mulholland Drive. And I realized also that it's the first time I've connected emotionally with this film that I love so much. Because although I adore it,
Yeah.
it's always felt emotionally remote to me in a way
Right.
that I don't, I'm not an actress in Hollywood. I
Yeah.
can't identify with any of the women characters in a way I can perhaps with other characters in other Lynch films.
Right.
This time, though, I felt it so raw
Yeah.
and so real.
Yeah. I also feel that way of, as much as I enjoy these characters and I feel for them, it is different than like the way that I would say I feel about like the Twin Peaks characters and stuff.
Yeah.
But I do think that having this connection to Rita has made it all the more important and meaningful to me, being able to see so much of her in it. And now that I have such strong feelings about her, I mean, like, people can't get me to shut up about her, like, I mean, really, it's a problem. I'll find any excuse to bring her up in conversation.
I'm doing the same thing.
I just love her so much. And she just, she really just deserved better. She had such a hard life, and then getting early onset Alzheimer's at like 40. So she never really got to live and enjoy her life and have that piece of adulthood that a lot of people that struggle with trauma from their childhood, at least sometimes they're able to find peace as an adult when they get their own agency and everything. And she never got that.
Right.
And I think that there is such a heartbreaking quality to Mulholland Drive in general. I think that by the end, you feel kind of run through the emotional gauntlet, especially like once you get a lot of like Diane and her feelings and everything and her story, and being able to connect it to Rita makes it that more heartbreaking.
Well, that's so interesting what you said about her never being able to kind of resolve or come to terms with this difficult life she had because she developed Alzheimer's so young. Because in Mulholland Drive, if we see these characters, so Rebecca Del Rio's singer, the characters played by Naomi Watts, the characters played by Laura Herring, if they're all like aspects of this fractured self of the victim, they struggle and ultimately fail to come together in the film. It kind of feels like they're all parts of Rita Hayworth in a way. And the hatred that Diane ultimately feels for Camila really kind of echoes the hatred that Rita Hayworth felt for this femme fatale figure that she herself was so identified with.
Right.
She really wanted to cast it off and be free of it.
Yeah.
She wanted it dead.
Yeah. Again, she just all she ever wanted was a quiet life.
And so, we see her put out the hit on Camila.
Yeah.
But the only death we actually witness is Diane's.
Right.
Is there only one woman to kill?
Yeah.
Maybe, right?
Yeah.
But there are many ways to read Mulholland Drive, and this hasn't negated any of those other ways to read it in my mind.
No,
it's just
no.
an entertaining other layer for me.
Yeah.
Another great connection between Rita Hayworth and Mulholland Drive, there's a deliberate allusion to Sunset Boulevard, the film. When Betty's going into Paramount Studios, the car that Gloria Swanson has is parked there. Incidentally, Edward Judson, Rita Hayworth's first husband, sold those cars. That was his job, those exact cars. Yeah. But anyway, in 1968, during Rita Hayworth's decline, the St. Petersburg Times published an article titled, "Hollywood Still Is Her Town, But No One Knows She's There." The author, John Hallowell, compared Rita Hayworth to Gloria Swanson's character in Sunset Boulevard in that article. So, although Sunset Boulevard is the more obvious connection, there we have another Rita Hayworth.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, like, so as we said, she had really early onset Alzheimer's. It's hard to tell when exactly it set in because there was like almost no research on it back then. It was really like they were still figuring it out. And also just how medicine used to be and still kind of is, where there isn't like a lot of care and focus on women's health. And so people wrote her off and attributed her erratic behavior to alcohol and alcoholism, which is so upsetting because there's so many accounts from her close friends and loved ones that said like they knew that wasn't her. They were like, that's not who she is, though. She's not a huge drinker. Like, that's not it. Something's horribly wrong. There was a story in Leeming's book about a time when she had called over her friends to have a dinner party. And then when they got there, she didn't know who they were. These were some of her oldest friends. And she chased them away with a knife. She thought they were like paparazzi. She didn't recognize them. And there's so many loved ones that have had these encounters with her where they said she didn't even recognize them. And they were, just like trying so hard to impress upon people like, no, it's not alcoholism, something's wrong. And then finally they get the diagnosis that it's Alzheimer's, but because they just kept blaming it on alcoholism, there's not a clear picture of when exactly it started.
Right.
They're just guessing it was around her 40s based on things that were happening at the time. But like I said earlier, it ruined her career as well.
Yeah.
She tried to do some like stage work and she couldn't because she couldn't remember her lines. And, so she was able to still make film happen for a little bit because she could take those breaks in between scenes.
Oh, yeah. And
recall
she
her
would
lines.
just drill one line at a time.
Yeah.
It was painstaking trying to film. An interesting thing that I have to add to what you've been describing is one of the friends who she threatened with a knife at that dinner party, and the friend who tried to get her a role on Broadway and tried to unsuccessfully coach her through those lines was Ann Miller.
Mm-hmm. Coco.
Ann Miller, Coco.
Another Mulholland Drive connection.
And a big one.
And a big one.
Because the role that Coco plays in both halves of that film is just a very interesting corollary to Rita Hayworth's life. And to think that she's there in this film playing opposite all of these perhaps different versions of her friend.
Right.
Beautiful.
Even down to a character named Rita.
Yeah.
Like, oof. I hope it was cathartic.
Yeah. At the end of her life, Rita's younger daughter, Princess Yasmin Aga Khan, took care of her in her last years. And Ann Miller, in particular, really admired the way that Yazzie, as she was nicknamed, stepped up and took beautiful care of Rita Hayworth. But incredibly sad that Leeming's book ends with Yasmin saying, "It's so hard to know what she's feeling, what's going on inside." Still, there were fleeting hints, indications, although Rita was silent most of the time and eventually would altogether lose the capacity for speech. Suddenly, for no apparent reason that anyone in the room could discern, she would utter one or two odd and enigmatic sentences. Could they be a clue to what she was thinking, to the images and memories flickering in her mind as she sat in her armchair, gazing straight ahead? "He used to do that," Rita would say. "He told me how to do that." But no one knew what she meant. I hate the idea that at the end of her life, she's regressed to this childhood state.
Right.
And which happens with Alzheimer's victims, unfortunately.
Yeah, I've seen it in my grandma.
Right. That they're connecting more with their childhood than they are with their adulthood. And for Rita Hayworth, it couldn't be more horrible.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if we want to go to the title of that book, in fact, it's based on a quote from Orson Welles where he said she had told him that being with him was the happiest time in her life. And he said, if this was happiness, imagine what the rest of it was like.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just truly like she had so much pain in her life and it started at such an early age, which is just heartbreaking. And again, like we see so many connections with Laura in that way.
Yeah.
Like from such a young age, she's so controlled by all the men in her life. A thought that I had just in the time that we've been recording is like, another connection to Laura is even just down to the control of the possessive, obsessed boss.
Yeah.
They both have bosses that are pursuing them sexually and hoping to control and possess them, and it just totally fractures their life, as if they weren't already fractured by the abuse at home. And just, you know, a slew of dangerous relationships and painful relationships, you know, a very complicated relationship to sex. It's just, I mean, that you could just go down the list, and there's so many connections
With Laura Palmer.
with Laura Palmer.
Yeah. To think that she went from being this little girl who was forced to sit alone on the porch in silence while other kids her age were playing and having fun, to in her adult life sitting alone silently in a chair, unable to speak because of Alzheimer's disease. I hate it. I hate it for her that this is what happened, that she, again, never got to resolve all of these fractures of herself. Princess Yasmin Aga Khan, though, did found the annual Rita Hayworth Gala in her mother's honor, and to date, the galas have raised over $90 million for research on Alzheimer's. And since you and I both have grandmothers
Yeah.
who suffered from Alzheimer's disease, that feels wonderful.
Yeah.
That at least research into this horrible disease has been funded in Rita Hayworth's memory.
Yeah, that was something I brought up to my mom when I was talking to her about this episode and the research we were doing. Is I was saying, like, honestly, it's kind of crazy knowing that the amount of help and care we're able to, and treatment that we're able to give my grandmother is totally tied to Rita.
Wow.
You know? Like, I couldn't help but think that like, all of that funding and research has absolutely paved the way that, like, in this year of 2026, my grandma is able to see doctors that know what they're facing, and, you know, although there's no cure, at least they know how to help, because there has been all this ability to spend the time and money on researching it further.
That's really beautiful, actually.
Yeah. I, like, teared up talking about it. I love Rita so much.
Me too. You know, she didn't write a memoir. And so Rita Hayworth's story is told through others. And many of those people have their own agendas.
Yeah.
Adrienne McLean said in her book, if certain Hollywood stars have not left their own records and reminiscences, if they are, in this limited sense, silent, that does not mean that there was never anybody there. We have over 60 films featuring Rita Hayworth, and she bursts with charisma, movement, and joyful expression. Her personal life was so painful, but in these performances, we get a small glimpse, I think, of the magic of this remarkable person.
Yeah.
I think about that quote from Catching the Big Fish, where Lynch talks about an artist's suffering and how we think that an artist has to suffer in order to produce, but he disagrees.
Yeah. Yeah, he said it's common sense. The more the artist is suffering, the less creative he is going to be. It's less likely that he is going to enjoy his work, and less likely that he will be able to do really good work. Right here, people might bring up Vincent van Gogh as an example of a painter who did great work in spite of or because of his suffering. I like to think that Van Gogh would have been even more prolific and even greater if he wasn't so restricted by the things tormenting him. I don't think it was pain that made him so great. I think his painting brought him whatever happiness he had.
Yeah.
And I think that is a fantastic connection to Rita Hayworth, because, again, like, she was doing this because she needed to. She needed to make a living. She needed to support all these evil husbands that tried to take her money. You know, she had a family. She had to do these things. But I think we've talked about that, like, she really did love dancing. And I think if she could have just been allowed to pursue that in whatever way she wanted to and approach that from whatever angle she wanted to, it could have been really beautiful.
Yeah.
And she would have actually been happy.
There's a fair in Trinidad. She dances a incredible dance choreographed by Valerie Bettis. She dances barefoot, and it is the wildest, most exuberant Rita Hayworth dance I've seen. And I feel like that's her true expression of joy in a way. But I agree with David Lynch here. It's not because of the suffering.
Right, no.
What would she have been without it?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing is, like, imagine if she had learned to dance also from a place of love rather than it being this, abusive teaching pattern from her father. Yeah, I think it could have been really, really beautiful and incredible. Because, I mean, we can look at that with David. He had... his family was so loving and supportive in his pursuits of art from the beginning. And look at all the amazing stuff we got from him.
Right. He didn't have to suffer.
Yeah, he didn't have, that kind of abuse in his home. And he was able to make amazing art. So he's right. It's not always about that suffering.
Yeah. Well, speaking only for myself, because I don't want to put words in your mouth, Indigo, but I am going to reject the possibility that all the richness of this illusion was accidental on Lynch's part.
Yeah.
I think that we're really careful on this podcast, especially when dealing with uncanny resonances, to not ascribe intentionality to Lynch. But in this case, I want David Lynch to have full credit for the depths of these layers of meaning.
Yeah.
He could have chosen any Hollywood actress.
Right. Like, he's so fond of Marilyn Monroe. It could have been Marilyn Monroe, but it's like specifically the Gilda poster. It's specifically the name Rita. It's having Ann Miller. It's having all of these, like, once it's hard to miss these connections. And, I've been blissfully unaware when watching it all these years, and now I can't help but see all these connections.
Yeah. And he deserves the credit for this.
Yeah.
Right? Because however you choose to read Mulholland Drive, this deep allusion to Rita Hayworth's life. We could say Mulholland Drive is the Rita Hayworth story, just like they're working on the Sylvia North story.
Yeah.
It's really, really beautiful and powerful. And to me, this feels so similar to the journey we took with Marlon Brando.
Yeah.
When we did our episode on The Wild One and the character of Wally Brando. It's something that appears momentarily and is so superficially obvious that it's easy to assume that's the end of it.
Yeah.
Rita Gilda.
And,
okay.
and just write it off.
Right. And stopping there, if you stop with that kind of superficial noticing, it doesn't impede deep enjoyment of the text.
Yeah.
But if you just look a little longer, like we did, there's this whole universe inside this little raindrop.
Right. And then you can't stop seeing all these connections. And also, like you kind of said, it can bring you an even deeper appreciation and love for it too, because then you have that connection. I mean, we talked about in the Wally Brando episode that, like, neither of us had felt so much tenderness for that character until we did all that research. And then now we do feel this, like, deep care for him. And listeners, I hope you feel the same way. I think we've had some folks reach out and say similar things, that they have also, now that they have all this context, have grown fond of Wally Brando. And we hope that you can find a way to feel that way about Rita Hayworth as well.
Yeah. David Lynch didn't like talking about his films. His famous quote is like, the film is the thing that does the talking.
Yeah.
So if we listen to what this layer of text is saying, I don't think the volumes it speaks are here by accident or just synchronicity.
Yeah.
This was intentional. This was him letting this film talk.
Right.
By inserting Rita Hayworth into it in this way.
Yeah. Well, listeners, I think we've pretty much wrapped up here, but if it isn't obvious yet, we really encourage you to watch some Rita Hayworth films and fall in love with her the way that we have over the process of this research. Again, we both really loved If This Was Happiness. If you are looking for just a great book.
And maybe you'll see things in that biography that also show up in Mulholland Drive that we missed. So
Yes.
get your corkboards ready and send us a message if you notice something that we've missed.
Please do. And like I said, we'll be posting some side-by-side comparisons as well of some of the things that we've mentioned in this episode. And if you do see anything else, totally reach out to us. You can follow us on Instagram at Full Blossom of the Evening, and you can message us there. Or if you don't use social media, you can also email us at fullblossomoftheeveningpodcast@gmail.com. If you see anything that you also think is important, we always love to hear that kind of stuff from you guys, for sure.
Next episode, we will have a guest again. We're going to be joined by Jeff Trexler next episode.
Huge.
Talk about the comic art of David Lynch. Jeff has done a series of panel discussions on this topic, and we are beside ourselves.
So excited.
So-
And also he's just been so incredibly kind to us.
Yeah.
And generous with with giving us all this incredible art to look at.
Yes.
We can't wait.
So thank you for listening to The Full Blossom of the Evening, and we'll sign off with
It was Laura, and she's come to kiss you goodbye.
goodbye, listeners.
Goodbye.
It was Laura, and I saw her glowing. I saw her